Okay, so we will start today's session. So good afternoon and good evening to everyone. And myself, Adira. So I am one of the coordinators of this project, and I'm basically from India, and I have joined in this project after completing my PhD from India. And I welcome all of you to this international lecture series, part of SEarth program. And today we have Professor Kurita Hiroshi with us to deliver the day one lecture. So he is from Niigata University, and his major expertise is in sedimentary geology. So he will introduce himself in detail before the lecture. So I would like to hand over to Professor Kurita. So I hope you all will enjoy his lecture.
Thank you
Kurita.
very much. Thank you very much, Tika, for introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Kurita Hiroshi from Niigata University, and I'm going to give you a talk of the day one for the online international lecture series. And the title for today is Streams Shape the Earth. The subtitle is Abiotic Processes. Abiotic means non-biotic processes on the Earth's surface. I will talk about the surface of the Earth, which include the shallow part of the crust. And my talk will concern weathering of rocks, transportation of rock particles, deposition of rock particles, and then finally diagenesis the rocks receives underground. My talk will have relationship with landscape here. Landscape and physical energy which work on landscapes. And what is important is factor of time in my talk. And all these are related to sedimentary rocks. This 80 or 90-minute program of myself is a story about sedimentary rocks and their links to landscape, physical energy, and time. Today, I'm going to give you two parts. In the first part, I'd like to talk about landscapes which are changing anytime, anywhere, and we would like to know how they are changing. That is part one. After that, in the part two, I will talk about things from rocks to landscapes. We can tell ancient landscapes by using geology on the basis of the information from rocks. And the keywords in this lecture will be landscapes, sedimentary rocks, and time, water, gravity, and material transport. So first, we would like to go to the part one. In this part, which relates to changing landscapes, I have two parts for the part one. First, I'd like to talk about water and gravity, how water and gravity work on the landscapes. And after that, I will emphasize the importance of the energy from the sun and energy from the Earth's interior. Okay, now we are going to the section 1.1. Landscapes change at every minute. Water and gravity work on these processes. This is an example of landscape in Niigata. You see beautiful mountains, and also we have beautiful floodplains where rice crop are raising, and we have river channel here. And landscapes are composed of several or many geographical elements that have various physical and biological characteristics. And we, the human race, use the surface of the land for our habitats and production to survive. The land gives us food, the land gives us a home. So our life depends on the nature of the land. And we would like to know how this kind of landscape formed. It's a question. This is the first diagram I'm showing to explain the scientific background of the landscape. This is a generalized section of geographical elements. Here we have mountains. And mountains will go down to plains. And we have shoreline here. And over the shoreline, we have sea. And when we think about the processes which are working every day on the surface of this geographical section, we have to think water and gravity. And the key, one of the key to understand the situation is base level. Yeah, base level. Base level is the sea level in the sea area, and it is connected to the river profile in the land area. And rocks exposed in the mountains above the base level are being eroded away. They have to be eroded in time. After that, the eroded crusts, rock particles, are transported down by the stream because of the water power. And those transported crusts are deposited when the stream power weakens. In general, the river power will decrease at the shoreline, and most particle carried by the river stream deposited along the shoreline like this. This is deposits. Okay, so now we have seen erosion process and transportation process and deposition process along a river stream flowing into the sea. And possibilities of these processes are controlled by the base level. Above the base level, we have only erosion. No deposition happens in this area. Below the base level, we have deposition and we have no erosion. below the base level. And this entire process is affected by water, and water flows due to gravity. So water and gravity works on all the processes of erosion, transportation, and deposition. Okay, this is a starting point of today's talk. Now we have seen the generalized section of the geographical element, and I have emphasized the movement of rock particles from the mountains to the sea. So I'm going to the next slide. So now I'm going to talk about the rivers. Why any river run through the mountains to the sea? It is affected by evaporation and the precipitation cycle of seawater, and it is driven by solar energy. We have the sun in the sky, and it gives heat to the earth, and water in the sea area can evaporate into the air, and sometimes it forms cloud like this. And when the clouds meet the mountains, precipitation happens. And once the precipitation happens, it runs back to the sea through river channel by gravity. So the sun is a big energy source in the surface processes which we are talking now. Rate of precipitation is an important factor of erosion and transportation. And the evaporation precipitation cycle is driven by the solar energy. Thus, the sun plays a very big role in the surface processes. In this slide, I have emphasized the importance of solar energy, which drives the water cycle. Water cycle can transport the clastic particle, rock particles. Okay. Next slide shows you, this slide shows you another aspect of the effect of solar energy on the surface processes. In the previous slide, I emphasized the importance of base level because base level controls the area of erosion and area of deposition. And the base level is not permanent. The base level changes according to the fluctuation of the solar energy that the Earth receives. When the global climate is getting warmer, the base level rises like this. And when the solar energy on the Earth's surface decreasing, the base level falls like this because of the cold weather. And this fluctuation is explained by the cyclic changes in the Earth's orbit around the sun. According to the cyclic changes of the Earth's orbit around the sun, the solar energy that the Earth receives fluctuate. And this phenomenon is known as the Milankovitch cycles. Milankovitch is the name of a scientist who found this principle. And in this aspect, again, the sun plays a very big role in the surface processes of rock particle movement. Okay. Now I have a question. I have talked about the erosion transportation deposition process, which can remove the rock material in the mountains away to the sea. So if these processes keep running for a very long time, for millions of years, the surface of the Earth has to be flat or near flat because of the continuing erosion. It's a good question, but the reality is not so. After 4.5 billion years history of Earth's development, the Earth still has a lot of mountains. So I have to answer this question in the next slide. It's because movement of the crust, which is affected by heat from the Earth's interior. Some part of the Earth's crust rises because of tectonic deformation. The tectonic deformation is driven by the heat radiated from the center of the Earth. The center of the Earth is now 6,000 degrees centigrade. It's a very hot place, and the heat which is kept in the Earth's interior is radiating into the space. And the heat difference of temperatures within the Earth's interior make the Earth's material move vertically or laterally, and it drives plate tectonics. And the rate of the mountain rising can compensate or surpass the rate of erosion. Then the mountain keeps being high or get higher because of the mountain rising. This is the reason why a mountain can exist. This figure shows you the tectonic deformation can make the land higher in some places, which makes mountains. Also, I would like to mention that in some part of the Earth's crust subsides instead of rising, also because of tectonic deformation. The deformation works as a driving force in some part of the Earth and works as a subsiding force in another part of the Earth. Okay. So this figure combines the effect of heat from the sun and the effect of the heat from the Earth's interior. A series of surface processes, including erosion, transportation, and deposition, takes place anytime and anywhere, as long as we have water and gravity and solar energy. That's the surface process. And this surface process of clastic movement, transportation, is also affected by the tectonic deformation of crust. The heat from the Earth's interior may make the land higher or sometimes lower. When the deformation makes the land higher, erosion continues. When when the deformation makes the land lower, space of deposition keep existing in spite of filling by the deposits. So now we have seen the combination of effect from the sun and the effect from the heat from the deep part within the earth. Okay. So now we can have a good answer to the previous question. What will happen if these processes run for a very long time? The land will not become flat. Instead of that, the ongoing processes like this change the shape of the land surface. We have ridges, valleys in the mountains, or we have plains along the coast, or we have lakes or oceans, and all of the shape of the land, the landscape, is the result of such kind of processes, including material transport and tectonic deformation of the crust. And at the same time, these processes leave a pile of deposits, mostly in the ocean area here. We have deposits below the base level. So these processes work on landscape. Also, material in the mountains here are removed and transported to the other part of the earth below the base level, mostly in the area of ocean. So landscape changes of landscapes and the formation of sedimentary rocks happens at the same time as a result of the same series of surface processes. Okay, I'm going to conclude the part one. And now we see the direct connection of the landscape and sedimentary rocks. Landscapes and sedimentary rocks are connected deeply. Why and how? In the next second part, we will see the scientific way of thinking when we analyze sedimentary rocks as a clue to ancient environments. Sedimentary rocks tell us much about the lost world, which is very interesting. So we are going to have a short break for 1 minute. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Kurita Hiroshi. Kurita is my family name and Hiroshi is my first name. I am a geology professor, and once I worked for a Japanese oil exploration company. After graduating my university some 40 years ago, I joined a Japanese oil company operating in Japan's Japanese oil field. And pictures on your right-hand side is the old one taken when I was 23 years old. And I was a young geologist on board offshore drilling rig searching for oil. And I left that company in the year 2001. It's about 20 or 22 years ago. And after that, I joined Niigata University. This is myself a year, 2 years ago. And this is a picture which was taken at a field trip last month. My specialty is stratigraphy, sedimentary geology, basin history, micropaleontology, palynology, and my research subject is mostly on Cenozoic geology, especially on Miocene. Okay, so this is the introduction of myself for your information. Okay, so I'm going to proceed to the part 2, which is titled From Rocks to Ancient Landscapes. Hi. The main part of this talk is about 3 fundamental theories. It's very important when we look at sedimentary rocks, important and basic and elementary, fundamental. And after explaining the theories, I will show some examples about how the theories works in the field data. And at the last of my talk, a short note about sedimentary basins will follow. Sedimentary basins is the largest framework which the sedimentary rocks or sedimentary geology can tell. So I'm going to talk about fundamental theories, 3 fundamental theories. Those are, the first one is law of superposition. The second one is Stokes' equation. And the third and last one is Walther's law of facies distribution. These are very basic and important. And all the modern theories and models for sedimentary rock formation have their basis on these 3. Without understanding these 3 principles, we are not able to read the information of the sedimentary rocks properly. Right. So first, we are going to look at law of superposition. Now you see a picture of a beautiful sedimentary rock outcrop, which I took 10 or 15 years ago. In most outcrops of sedimentary rocks, we have many platy structures like this. It looks like lines in the surface of the outcrop, but actually they are the planes. They have the extent, lateral extent, so it's not the lines, it's not plane. And between the planes like this, we have a kind of sedimentary rock. So in most outcrops of sedimentary rocks, there are spaced planes like these, planes, and in between which a kind of sedimentary rock occupies this space. And these planes are called bedding planes. Between the adjacent 2 bedding planes, we have a bed. This is bed of sedimentary rock. Usually a bed is characterized by relatively uniform features inside. We have a little changes inside the space between these 2 bedding planes, and this characteristics belongs to this particular bed. So the next question is, what do bedding planes mean? This is what law of superposition tells us. The law is expressed like this. Any bed must be younger than all the underlying beds. This means that first, sedimentary beds must have the time order of the genesis. In this picture, we have all the rocks here. And when we go up in the picture, we have younger rocks. And any bedding plane that separates two adjacent beds is synchronous surface, which means all of the bedding planes are the time markers within the thick sedimentary pile. That means when we have bedding planes 1, bedding plane 2, bedding plane 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So bedding plane 1 should be older than all the overlying bedding planes. And bedding plane 8 should be younger than all of the underlying bedding planes or beds. And any bedding planes are the surface which was made when a certain kind of deposition was over. So all the bedding plane once was a surface of the earth where depositional processes happened. So this is a summary of law of superposition. This law tells you that any bed must be younger than all the underlying ones. Then, when you see a bedding plane, you have to see it as a time marker, which have time order of genesis. And those bedding plane tells you the relative time order of the rocks. This was found and published in 1669 by Nicholas Steno. He's a Danish scientist, later Catholic bishop. He published a thesis about his observation on shark teeth fossils in sedimentary rocks. It was in 17th century, and this is very beginning of the modern geology. Okay, that's the first explanation about the three fundamental theories. The second one is Stokes' equation. It's about the meaning of grain size in a bed. As we saw in the previous slides, a bed is a material between two adjacent bedding planes. A bed is characterized by relatively uniform features, and most important feature of a bed is the grain size. And I'm going to explain the reason why the grain size is very important. And for the explanation, Stokes' equation is very useful, and that equation explains what the grain size of a sedimentary rock means. So look at the equation. Before looking at the actual Stokes equation, we have to understand the concept of terminal velocity. Provided we have a grain like this, this is grain, and we have fluid. It is usually water or air. And the concept of terminal velocity is a final velocity that a certain grain can reach when it falls freely through a fluid. Usually it's water or air. When a grain is falling freely through a fluid, the grain receives gravity to pull down, which want to pull down the grains towards the center of the earth. But fluid around the grain have viscosity. So the viscosity of fluid make resistant force work on the falling grain, which can be a resistant force for falling of the grain. And once the gravitational force is balanced with the resistant force of the fluid, the fall velocity becomes constant without acceleration. This is the terminal velocity. So every grains that fall through fluid, they must have terminal velocity E, and they cannot accelerate faster than the terminal velocity value. This is the reason why we are not killed by raindrops. Okay, now we have seen the concept of terminal velocity. Then we are going to see the actual equation made by Dr. Stokes. V is the terminal velocity of the grain, and the D is diameter. Rho P is density of particle. This is density of fluid. So this is the density difference between the grains and the surrounding fluid. And we have gravity. So this part is factors to fall. And this part, 18 mu, multiplied mu, mu is for viscosity of fluid. So this is a factor to resist the fall. In many cases, when we think about geological processes like deposition or transportation, density differences are nearly constant because most mineral grains have constant or similar density, and the density of water is almost constant. So the terminal velocity of a grain in a geological process is determined solely by its diameter here. This one. When we apply this equation to sedimentary grains, we can say larger grains sink faster in still water. In other words, an upward flow faster than the terminal velocity can keep the grain floating without falling in the flow. Again, an upward flow faster than the terminal velocity can keep the grain floating in the flow. So let's see the diagram. Usually, in most geological processes, grains are transported in the flow, features turbulence. A turbulence of flow has an upward element like this. So this upward forcing overcomes the gravity. The flow can keep the grains being transported without falling of the grain. So this is the meaning of the phrase that an upward flow faster than the terminal velocity can keep the grain floating in the flow. This is a reason, or this is a good explanation of why and how a sedimentary particle can be transported by river flow. The Stokes equation gives you a good explanation for that phenomenon. So once the flow velocity decreases and becomes slower than the terminal velocity of the grain begins to sink and eventually is deposited on the bed. If the flow weakens, the upward element of flow also weakens like this. So a gravity which pulls down the grain easily overcome the upward element of the turbulence of the flow. This is the exact moment when a sedimentary rock forms. Every sedimentary rock were made at the time of deceleration of the flow, which once transported the grains. This is a summary, what I talked about the Stokes equation and its application to the geological processes concerning the transportation or deposition of a clastic particle. First, flow can entrain the grain and they can make flow strong enough, can entrain the grain and incorporate the grain into the flow. And while the turbulence is strong enough to overcome the gravitational force, the flow can keep floating of the grain, and thus the grain can be transported. And when the flow weakens like this, the flow cannot keep the floating of the grain, that the grains should be deposited on the bed. So this is one complete cycle of entrainment and transportation and deposition. So presence of a sedimentary rock or clastic rock should mean that once there was a flow strong enough to entrain and transport the grains, and then the flow weakened so that the grains were deposited. This series of physical processes is the meaning of a crustic rock bed. In other words, every sedimentary rock is the evidence of the presence of a flow as well as its deceleration in the geologic past. Now we can connect the geologic body like sedimentary bed to the movement of the grains of the geologic past, which we cannot see anymore. So this is a summary for the Stokes equation. Please remember the terminal velocity is larger when the diameter is larger. Then larger grains in the bed means higher velocity that once transported them. In other words, a grain size in the bed can be the direct indicator of the current velocity of the geologic past. I think it's very fantastic, isn't it? Grain size is a very simple parameter which you can see instantly when you arrive at an outcrop. And it should be the direct indicator of the current velocity of the geologic past many, many years ago. I think it's very interesting and wonderful. More in other words, difference in grain size means the difference in current velocity that created those beds. The Stokes equation was published in the middle of the 19th century by Professor George Stokes, who was born in during the era of Napoleon, 1819, and he died at the beginning of the 20th century. This is an explanation of Stokes' equation. Okay, now we got through the two of the three fundamental theories. So this is the last one. The third one is Walther's law of phase distribution. Phases. This is a new word which I say for the first time in today's lecture. What is phases? So let's start with the word phases. This picture is an example of a Pleistocene sedimentary rocks, and phases of fasces is the characteristics that a group of sedimentary rock layers collectively shows. So it's not a single bed. A group of sedimentary rock may show some kind of characteristics, and we call it phases. For example, in this outcrop, phases is different in the lower part here and upper part here. The reason why I can say upper and lower is the recognition of the bedding planes like this. We can tell the bedding planes from this picture. So by using the law of superposition, we can say this is older part and this is younger part. And the time during these formations were deposited passes like this. This is older and this is younger. And based on that recognition of bedding planes, the lower part is characterized by faintly bedded, faint bedding sandstone. And this is the characteristics of facies. So we can say the lower part of this outcrop is composed of faintly bedded sandstone facies. And in turn, in the upper part, above this bedding plane, we have conglomerate bed, and in between we have sandstones like this. So we call it alternation of sandstone conglomerates. So we can say the upper part of this outcrop is characterized by alternation of sandstone and conglomerates, combination of sandstone and conglomerates, and we call it alternation facies, comprising sandstone and conglomerates. So this is an explanation of what facies is. And on the basis of this understanding, we are going to the next question about Walther's law. Why did these different facies accumulate one by one? Or I would say, what's meaning of this series of facies distribution in a vertical direction? Okay. For the explanation of the facies distribution, I would like to introduce you simplified model of depositional environment. This is a surface of an Earth, and probably it extends hundreds of meters or kilometers wide. This is the surface of the Earth. And we have flow, which can transport the sedimentary grains. And different colors indicate different flow velocity. For example, this is fastest, this is slowest, this is intermediate, this is intermediate. So we geologists can abstract the information from the actual environment by the scale of flow velocity, because flow velocity determines the grain size, which is a basic characteristics of sedimentary rocks. And the distribution of environment like this should create deposits of different grain size like this. On a single time frame, on the same time frame, according to the Stokes equation. According to the Stokes equation, grain size reflects the flow velocity. This is agreeable because we now know the grain size is a direct indicator of flow velocity once worked on the grains. So this is a model. Then we are going to see the effect of time and effect of a series of deposition. In most cases, the environments move gradually through time. For example, at time 1, this is an older time frame, we have environment A, environment B, environment C, D, and after a certain amount of time, environment B moves like this, see these like this, and sometimes they can move the different direction, like this. And this is the starting point, the environment where sedimentary rocks can form, move gradually through time. And if the environments were recorded, all the environments were recorded in the rocks at each time plane, the distribution of rock faces can be like the section above, like this. In this section, we have orange rock, blue rock, orange rock, blue rock. At this particular point, we have yellow rocks, we have orange rocks, yellow rocks, orange rocks. So if these processes can happen in the natural environment, different rock faces can accumulate one by one. And this is what the Walther's law of faces distribution tells us. And in this diagram, please note that only the product of the adjacent environment can be deposited directly over the previous one. For example, contact between orange and yellow is possible. And it's because orange and yellow is distribution like this, but blue and yellow can have the contact in the sedimentary rock pile, because blue environment and yellow environment is not have a direct connection in a certain time frame. This is what Walther's law tells. But I think it is still a bit complicated. So I will show you another example. When we apply this Walther's law of facies distribution to this outcrop, which I showed you in the previous slide, what happens looks like this. As I said before, the outcrop, we can define two facies. In the older part of the outcrop, we have faintly buried sandstone facies. And we call the time of deposition of this facies type 1. And before the formation, after the formation of this bedding plane, the facies, different facies was deposited, which is alternation of sandstone and conglomerate facies. And we call the time during which the alternation facies were deposited time 2. From these information of this single outcrop, which have two different facies, which was accumulated vertically one by one, we can say the ancient environment has to be like this. This is a plan view of this particular area at the time 1, when the sandstone facies were deposited. From the Walther's law of facies distribution, we have to say the depositional environment for the sandstone is close to the depositional environment which accumulates sandstone and conglomerate like this. They cannot be apart. It must be adjacent like this. And after the time 1, we have come to time 2, when the alternation of sandstone and conglomerate facies deposited at this particular point. So during the time 2, the distribution of depositional environment must be drawn like this. And this is what the Walther's law tells. The sandstone and conglomerate environment moves like this, and at the same time, sandstone environment will be gone away. And we are looking at this particular place once the deposition of sandstone facies happened first, and after that, sandstone and conglomerate alternation facies were created after that. In other words, vertical association of sedimentary facies constrains the environment distribution at the time of their distribution. Yes, explanation of Walther's law is a bit difficult for me. So I think some of you thinks this explanation is difficult to understand, but it's quite natural. This law was published by Johannes Walther. He's a German who was born in 1860, and he died right before the World War II. Okay, I'm going to have a short break for 1 minute. Okay, I'll start again. And this is a picture of sand dunes at the Japan Sea coast. This place is only 10 minutes walk away from our campus. So if you come to Niigata University, you can enjoy this kind of landscape along the coast. Okay, we are going to have another 20 minutes before closing. Now, in the previous slides and explanation, we have looked through the 3 basic principles, which is important when we try to interpret sedimentary rock records. One is law of superposition, which tells us rocks have very strong tie to the time. Rock is time. Rock is time. Okay. The second one is Stokes' equation, which tells us grain size is equal to flow velocity. Grain size is a direct indicator of the ancient flow velocity that doesn't exist anymore at this moment. The third and last one is the Walther's law of Page's distribution, which tells us about constraints of environment, deconstruction, when we look at the rock facies distribution. And these three are the very basic, important principles. And in this next section, I would like to show you examples how the theory works. This is the first example from the lower Pleistocene sedimentary rocks in Niigata area, which is 2 million years old. This is a stream. This is a stream and mountains. Stream and mountains, and there we have large outcrops like this. And here is one of my students. And when we arrive to any outcrop like this, first we have to look for the bedding planes. This is a very important starting point. We have to look for the bedding planes. It is time marker, and bedding planes is a key for judging the order of deposition. This is an easy example, so we can tell bedding planes like bedding plane here. This is the most distinctive bedding planes here. Again, this is there we have bedding planes like this. Yeah. So by the recognition of these bedding planes, the planes tilted to the left-hand side, and order of deposition should be like this. This is oldest, and this is the youngest in this particular outcrop. This is what we have to do at any outcrop in the fieldwork. Then we want to know the grain size because it's very important. So when we have a close look at the sedimentary rocks, like this student, we can tell here we have mudstone, we have fine sand layers, we have mudstone again, and we have fine sand, medium sand, coarse sand. We have to look at the grain size of each sedimentary rocks, and also we have to take care to recognize its vertical changes. Vertical changes is very important next to the grain size. Grain size and vertical changes. So from this picture, we have mudstone-rich facies, and we have sandstone-rich facies over that. Hi, this is an example of understanding of this outcrop picture by myself. Then, once we come to know the grain size and its vertical changes, these changes can be read as changes in velocity because we now know Stokes' equations. So this is the result. In the older part of this outcrop, we have basically mudstone. So the velocity that existed in this particular point at the time of deposition was very weak, or I would say there were no flow, stagnant. And after that, at the time of deposition of the upper part of this outcrop, we have strong flow, a flow strong enough to transport sand grains and deposit sand grains like that. So now is this shows you the direct information from the outcrop. First, we have bedding planes which enable us to judge the order of deposition. And second, we can get information of grain size and its vertical changes, which can be read as changes in velocity. So now, finally, we try to reconstruct the depositional environment by using Walther's law. This figure shows you geological information extracted from the outcrop by our observation. So from this information, we can draw interpretation of depositional environment like this. This is modified section B of this area 2 million years ago when these rocks were deposited. And what we observed is the sandstone, mudstone, and sandstone facies B overlies the mudstone facies. And this is our observation, and it is based on existing material. And from starting from this observation, we can go to the interpretation of past environment. Because we have two different phases, one is mudstone rich and another one is sandstone rich. So we have to have two different, we have to think two different kind of depositional environment for the interpretation of this outcrop. One is environment where mudstone were deposited. Another one is an environment where sandstone were deposited. This is the first step of interpretation by using Walther's law. Because we have two phases at the same point, we have to think two different depositional environment. And based on the basis of this first step interpretation, we can go to the second step. The fact that facies B, sandstone-rich facies, were deposited over different facies A, which is dominated by mudstone, we can tell at the time of deposition of facies B, a set of environments which have two different environments have to move this direction. And this movement of the set of depositional environment can produce this set of different depositional phases which were deposited one by one. And this is an application of Walther's law to the outcrop, which I showed you as an example. And before the application of Walther's law, we we used Stokes equation and law of superposition. So this is an example how the three basic theories work at an actual outcrop in the field. And this is another example from the lower Pleistocene Niigata again. And this is a picture which I showed you before, which have sandstone-rich interval here. This is conglomerate and sandstone. And in the riverbed, we have conglomerates again here, So we have conglomerate part, sandstone part, and alternation part, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This is existing material, which I pictured at an outcrop. And this diagram is called geological columnar section based on my observation. And based on this observation, I tried to make the construction of coastline and the river system once should have existed 2 million years ago. This is a coastline. We have sea and we have land and we have river system like this. And after that, coastline prograde like this. And then we have transgression and we have lagoons here or something else. So this is an actual example of sedimentary facies analysis. And all of this interpretation process are based on the three basic theories which I explained in the previous slides. Okay. All right. Probably I will have another 6 or 7 minutes before closing. The last topic today I'd like to show you concerns why sedimentary rocks can accumulate up to thousands of meters thick. And for understanding the thick sedimentary accumulation, we have to think about the concept of sedimentary basins. Sedimentary basins as a place where very thick sedimentary rocks can accumulate for a certain duration of time. And most sedimentary basins, or all the sedimentary basins, are affected by tectonic deformation of the crust in a large scale. And if we don't have any tectonic deformation on the crust, we may have very flat land area like this. So when we don't have any clastic crust deformation by tectonics, we have no accommodation space for deposition, so no accumulation of sedimentary rocks happens. But when tectonic deformations work on the certain part of the crust, for example, stretching and large normal floats formation like this, we have accommodation space for deposition like this. So once this kind of space between the base level and the Earth's surface, this space can accommodate a series of sedimentary rocks as long as the clastic transportation by rivers happens like this. So what I want to say from this figure is that we need large-scale tectonic deformation of the Earth's crust to have a thick accumulation of sedimentary rocks. This means thick accumulation of sedimentary rocks should have strong relation to Earth's tectonics, which was driven by the heat from the Earth's interior. This is the last topic I would like to show you today. Such tectonic processes are solely due to the heat from the Earth's interior, and it's not related to the solar energy. So this is the Earth's side of the surface process, which most sedimentary rock should be related. And this is a picture of the Niigata sedimentary basins taken at the mountain top, which I climbed 2 weeks ago. Niigata University is here. Yeah, we have Niigata University. And this is a coastline. We have Japan Sea. And we have basement mountains. This is mountains. And now I'm on another mountain here. And this is a stretch of sedimentary basins. Sedimentary basins, which have 20 or 25 kilometers wide. And this Niigata sedimentary basin has more than 6 kilometers thick neogen sediments underground, which was formed during the time 18 million years ago to present. 6 kilometers. Probably this is one of the thickest sedimentary record in the Japanese islands. So the Niigata is a very special place to think about sedimentary rocks. Hi. And this is a map of Honshu Island. Here is the coastline on the Japan Sea side, and this is the coastline of the Pacific side, and Niigata is here. This figure then is an example which shows you the scale of basins. This is a figure from my recent studies on middle Miocene basins in and around Niigata. The scale is, this is for 50 kilometers. In the Niigata area, we have large basins which extends from northern part of Niigata to Akita in the north, and we have different kind of basins in the south between Niigata city and the Toyama prefecture to the west. And this is one of the reconstruction of the geologic past based on sedimentary rocks, based on my previous papers. Even if we would like to talk about large-scale geologic event like sedimentary basins, we have to always start with a look at a single bed in the field. This is a very first step we have to have for geological considerations. And by using the principles and other models of geology, we reconstruct local environments in many places within the basins. And after collecting the data from various locations, we can eventually reach the changing shape of the whole sedimentary basins, which can date back to tens of million years ago. This is what we geologists work on by using information of sedimentary rocks. Okay. So this lecture will close in a few minutes. This is the summary. Now we have looked at very basic principles that we can apply to sedimentary rocks anywhere in the world. There are only a few simple principles. It's not very complicated, and they are very useful and cannot be overlooked by every geologist. And all modern geological ideas have come from these bases. And when we are lucky enough, we can talk even about sedimentary basins of tens of kilometer scale of millions of years ago. This is what I talked today's session. And now I'm going to show some conclusions for your information. This is a figure which shows you a summary of today's topics. Sedimentary rocks are the consequent product of material transport from the land to the ocean. In this model, sedimentary records forms here. So when we look at sedimentary rocks and outcrops, at the same time, we are looking at the material transport from mountains to the sea by the power of rivers on the land. And this material transport happened in a huge scale that has been working for billions of years on the Earth's surface. That's what I talked today. And at the same time, the forms of the land changes by erosion and deposition. So the landscape we see today is the consequence of the surface processes like this, which can be explained by the knowledge of geology. This is the last slide. The processes are driven by two energy sources. One is from the sun and one is from the Earth's interior. When we would like to interpret these processes, we use principles like law of superposition, Stokes equation, and Walther's law. By this kind of consideration, we notice huge material transport on the Earth's surface takes place every day today, or of course in ancient times, and of course in future time. And sedimentary rocks are the only media that can record the processes in the past. So reading the record from the rocks is one of the most exciting moments in the natural sciences, I believe, and I think it's enjoyable. So please enjoy by yourself by looking sedimentary rocks at outcrops. Okay, this is a picture of the landscape in Niigata. Such kind of knowledge might have turned your mind in some ways, I hope. After knowing this information, the landscape like this may look in a slightly different way. I hope so. Thank you very much for your attention. Okay, it's over.
Thank you, Kurita-san, for your informative lecture on clastic sedimentary rocks. So, students, if you have any questions, you may proceed to ask.
I wanted to say thank you.
Welcome. So Satish-san will have a concluding note.
Okay, so let me thank Professor Kurita. Professor Kurita, can you just come up to show up your face?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but my
Your
old
camera is not
PC
working?
does not have camera.
Oh,
I'm
really?
sorry for that.
Sorry for that. Anyway, we had a wonderful lecture today, and I myself, Satish, who is coordinating this project as a whole, and with the help of several staff around me. So today is the first day of this lecture series, and I hope everyone enjoyed or had a wonderful time learning about sedimentary rocks and their value in understanding geology. So I would just want, I unfortunately I could not attend, I could not be present in the beginning of this lecture because I had another important meeting. So from today onwards we will continue with this lecture series, and many of you, I hope, will enjoy the what do you say, earth science as a whole, and the various topics we have selected for this year. And next and some of you will, I'm pretty sure, are joining the on-site lecture as well, on-site training and lecture. So wish you all the best, and I hope to see you all again in the forthcoming lectures. And please remember that you will have to take at least 8 lectures, and you have to give sufficient reports as well to get a credit for this lecture. So thank you for joining this lecture, and see you tomorrow.